It's time to begin creating solid models. For this lesson, we will use the Create New Design from File command to open the FSAE Steering Wheel 3 Fusion Archive file. The file will contain the component as well as sketches for the main plate, shaft pattern, and a sketch named spline. The first thing we need to do is activate the steering wheel base plate component. Next, we are going to hide the spline and shaft pattern sketches, leaving only the main plate sketch visible. From the toolbar, or by pressing the E key, start the Extrude tool. You can also press S on the keyboard, and Extrude will be on the toolbox by default, or use Press Pull from the marking menu. Any of these options are valid, it just depends on how you prefer to work. As we move forward in this course, I will start offering fewer comments about alternative ways of accessing tools, and simply tell you which tools are needed. For the extrusion geometry, the profile that we want to use is the main plate sketch, and we will leave the 4 profiles unselected to remain open. Once the profile is selected, click and hold the left mouse button on the arrow and pull it up to create the extruded feature. As you pull up, notice that a dimension appears to show you what the height of the extrusion is. Type 0.375 in the value window to set the final extrusion height. While we are in a tool, let's look at a few options in the dialog box. For this feature, we will start the extrusion from the profile plane. We also have the option of setting an offset from profile plane to begin the feature, or even selecting an object. We can also choose to extrude in one direction or 2 directions, with individual heights, or making it symmetric. We can also extrude up to another object or through all of the model. We can enter a distance like we did in the mini dialog box, and enter a taper angle. We can choose what sort of operation we want. We can add geometry to an existing body, or cut geometry. In this case, we want to create a new body because the component we need is already active. If we started a new file, we could create a new component while we were extruding by using the New Component option. We'll select OK to create the solid. When the extrusion is created, the main plate sketch will be hidden by default. It can be turned on at any point in time if we need it for additional operations, but we will leave it off. The next feature we need is the shaft pattern. Turning the shaft pattern sketch back on, we can hover over the profiles and see that they will highlight, though at times this can be a bit of a challenge. Starting the Extrude tool, it becomes more difficult to select the profile because the top face of the extrusion can be used as an extrusion profile. On the right end of the toolbar is the Select Options pull-down. At the bottom, I can change the filters to focus on sketch geometry, and that makes it much easier to select the sketch profiles. Another option would be to rotate the model so you could see the sketch profiles directly, but that's not always possible in a complex design. By default, Fusion 360 will want to create geometry away from the body, adding volume to it. I will click and drag the arrow back through the body, and it will automatically convert to a cutting operation. Like the first extrusion, we have the option to override this to make the extrusion a join operation. We can also switch to intersect so that the remaining geometry is the combination of the 2 features. For this design, we will go with the cut operation and set the distance to through all before selecting OK to create the feature. With this feature complete, let's activate the top level of the design and save the file, giving it the name FSAE Steering Wheel 3. A quick note about versions and the differences between how we handled the Steering Wheel 2 and 3 files. When we created the new design for FSAE 3, we didn't save that immediately. We started to create the model instead. When we created the FSAE 2 file, we saved it first before we began to edit, so it has an additional version. This is a best practice when creating a new file from existing data, so that if need be, you can close it without saving changes you made after the initial creation. I can see this difference displayed in the data panel, which shows the version count for each file. While we are in the data panel, we can use the settings tool to change the display of the files from grid to list. Since we will be creating a series of files with the same name but a different number at the end, this will help make it easier for us to find the correct file. You can also change the sort order from by name to latest updated. This is another effective way of more quickly finding the files that you've actively been editing. I'll go ahead and close the data panel and be ready to move on to the next steps.